At first glance, these two solid PVA bags look really similar, but I absolutely guarantee that one of them is going to catch you more carp than the other. So I've made up a bag here to show you all the mistakes that I used to make when I started solid bag fishing well over 20 years ago. So at first glance, that might not look too bad to you. I mean, it's a solid PVA bag, right? Now in a minute, I'm going to open it up and show you what's wrong on the inside. But just by looking at this bag, I can immediately see two big problems. We've got big air gaps in the corners there. It's squidgy, it's floppy, and it's really not going to cast very well at all. And that's because it's not aerodynamic. This is a good example of how firm and tight a solid PVA bag should be for getting any kind of distance. And I'm achieving this with a dedicated fine solid PVA bag mix, and then I've backfilled with 6mm pellets just to keep the weight of the bag down. It's also another great example of why it really pays to fold in the corners at the last minute, because I've had this bag pre-made for at least 48 hours and I can just get it even tighter by holding off folding in the corners until I'm just ready to cast. The reason why this bag is a bit soft and a bit floppy is that I struggled to get good tension on the neck. And what I used to do, I used to just twist it up like that, lick over it, and then hope that was good enough. And it really wasn't. If I give this bag a bit of a squeeze, we can see it's starting to open up the neck. And because I struggled to cast these bags very far because they weren't aerodynamic, I ended up using bigger and bigger leads. And what happened is when it impacted the water, this neck would just explode. It would discharge its contents all over the surface of the lake, and I'd still kind of be fishing, but I certainly wouldn't be fishing a solid PVA bag. Nowadays I secure it properly with PVA tape, and the bags never explode on impact with the water. So let's cut it open and see what else is going on in this bag. So the first thing I'll notice here is the position of the lead. And this is something I used to struggle with because my bags would always wobble in flight and I didn't understand why. Lead position in a PVA bag is absolutely critical. You've got a lot of mass there, and in this instance it's too far away from the nose of the bag. That's the nose of the bag, that's the face that presents to the air, and if the lead is not either in the middle of the bag or slightly nose forward, then you're going to have the centre of gravity of the bag too far back, and it's not going to fly well. It's going to wobble, it's not going to go straight, and you're going to lose a lot of distance. And one of the reasons why I used to struggle to get my leads far enough forward was that I was trying to use a little anti-tangle sleeve on a quick change system like that, because I thought that it was necessary on all rigs, but it's really not. Nowadays I just tie the rig directly onto a ring swivel. Now you can see here I've used a mix of half boilies and large pellets. So when you're trying to get a PVA bag tight, you'll end up squidging it and twisting it, and you're turning the neck, and you're trying to get a nice tight package. And what's happened is that I've actually pushed a boilie half onto the point of a hook. And you might think, well, that's never going to happen. Well, it happened to me multiple times, and it took me a while to fix it, to be honest. That is not going to catch me a carp. It's safer just to use pellets. I like to actually use 3mm pellets or dedicated PVA bag mix at the nose of the bag because it avoids this problem completely. The next thing we can notice here is that we've got a rig tubing on a standard semi-fixed inline rig, and I get a flurry of beeps and no take, and I just assumed that it was a liner. What was happening is that the carp was coming along, feeling the weight of the lead, and he was actually using the weight of the lead to throw the rig out. So I decided to switch to a running lead inside my solid PVA bags, and the results went through the roof. Very high hook to land ratio, and I hardly ever get ejected. Now I'm not saying that a bag tied like that isn't going to catch you a carp or two. That's how I used to fish. I caught a carp or two, but I always knew that there was more potential in it, that I could catch more. And I'm going to show you all the little tips and tricks that I've learned and I've incorporated in 20 years of fishing solid PVA bags. First, let's have a look at the rig. So there are no hard and fast rules as to which rig you can use or you can't use. You can use a hair rig, you can use a slip D rig, you can use a multi-rig. As long as it's built using a supple braided material, pretty much anything goes. But when you're choosing a supple braided material to work with, I'd steer clear of anything fine. Fine braid is like cheese wire, and that can cause a lot of mouth damage very quickly. I prefer to use a thick, heavy 25-pound hook link. It works and it's safe for the carp. Now, I'm not saying that you can't use mono inside a PVA bag. It very much depends on how you build the bag. If you put the lead in first and then slip the bait in last, then you can probably get away with mono. It's just that's not how I build my bags, so I've never really kind of got into that. The way I prefer to build my bags is I put the hook bait in first, little bit of bait, then the lead goes in the middle, then I'll backfill it with bait. And to do that, I need a supple braided material that I can curl up in the base and in the middle of the bag. Right, let's knock up a simple little supple braided rig here. I'm partnering a size 7 chod twister with 25-pound armour link. It would probably be easier for me to work with 20 pounds or a different size hook. It does work, it's just a bit tight on eye size. So simple overhand knot to start. No need to blob that, I'm just going to cut that straight and leave it. For hook bait, I'm just going to grab a little dumbbell. This is a 10 by 15 pink life system wafter. It could be anything you fancy. These are nice little hook baits. You want to use a fairly small hook bait for solid PVA bag fishing. It could be a bottom bait, it could be a wafter. I don't really use pop-ups much in solid bags. To get the hair rig length right, I just pull it up there so it nests under, and then we just whip the knotless knot. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 takes me down to the point, and I'm going to measure off. That's 19 centimetres. So that's the basic knotless knot tied as is. You could absolutely leave it like that. I'm just going to put a little hook bead on. It's a trick that I use on my mono rigs. You can use the same trick on a supple braided rig. Helps to stop the knotless knot from rotating, and that's a stronghold bead going on there. Grips the shank nicely, and I can just set that so that the hook is always down. No matter what angle that bait is, the hook point is always down. It's always point first. It's always the point that comes into the contact with the carp slip first of all. And that's why I don't want a kicker on there, because a kick would actually be closing down the effective gape. So I just want that to operate exactly like that. I've had a very successful winter with this little rig. Done 11 nights, caught 9 carp to 56 pounds, multiple 40s in there, all on this simple little rig, all nailed about 20mm back. So the finished rig's about 15 centimetres long. It always works for me. If they're too short, the rig can come into operation too quickly, and I have found that I've been done too many times on that. You don't want them too long as well, because it's a lot to fold up into the bag, so I just find 15 centimetres works for me. If you want to put a sinker or two on here or a bit of putty, you can do, but you really don't need anything like that at all. Simple is always best. I prefer not to use a quick change connection. That is just simply tied on with a 4-turn uni knot to a standard ring swivel. So we've made a supple braided rig, and I've put it inside a solid PVA bag, and I can show you 2 solid PVA bags here, and they both look very similar, right? I know one's got a leader and one's got a PVA bag stem, but this one I'd be extremely confident in getting a bite on that. This one I wouldn't be so confident in it, and I'm going to show you why. So inside this bag is a normal semi-fixed lead system, looking something like this. This is set up with tubing, this is not. And this is how my solid PVA bag rigs used to look. Inline lead, set up with a tail rubber up there, supple braided rig, and hook bait at the other end. And of course I caught a few carp. I used to love my solid PVA bag fishing. But it was all right in the waters that I was fishing. relatively small carp, relatively easy waters, wang them out, catch a few. It was okay, it worked. It wasn't until I started taking my bags to more challenging waters, bigger carp, fewer carp, more clued up fish, that I'd start to get a little flurry of beeps, beep, 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 and then nothing. I just got done, I got done, and I got done again. And I spent a good few years messing around with all sorts of tricks at the hook end, trying to solve this problem, and I got absolutely nowhere. It wasn't until about 16 years ago that I started playing around with inline running rigs, and I made some adjustments and it all fell into place for me. And literally my results were transformed overnight. So what's the big deal about an inline running lead system versus a traditional semi-fixed lead system? I mean, this is the way that the manufacturers design these things to work, so what's the problem? So the problem is, carp's going to come along, it's going to pick up the rig, hook my tray there, and feel the weight of the lead, and he's going to swing it around. And I know that this is, you know, just in air and it's not how it actually works, but effectively the carp is going to use the weight of the lead to shake the rig out, because he can, because this is just a shock effect, and he will literally lever the hook out. So the couple of beeps that you get, the little short beep, 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 that is that process going on. I saw it countless times in my own fishing. I've seen it with loads of guests over the years here. If you use a semi-fixed rig system for clued up fish, you're going to get done a lot. So we need to fix this. So when you buy an inline lead, they're going to look something like this. This is a dedicated solid bag lead, but it's got a tail rubber and it's got a plastic insert. So how do we convert that into an effective running lead system? Well, first of all, we lose the tail rubber, then we pop the plastic insert out. And that just leaves us a lead without any extra bits. Then I'm going to take a little anti-tangle sleeve. Could be any length one, I just happen to be using the short ones today. Put it on a gate latch needle, take some lead-free leader, pull it all the way down, and then pop it over. That's just a regular size 8 ring swivel there. Pop it over like that. That's going to control the fit between the swivel and the lead. Go back to the other end of the leader, take the leader, pass it through the lead like that, thread it all the way through, and we pull that in there like that. When I pick up the hook end, at first there is a tiny little pinprick hooking effect there, just with the weight of the lead, and then the carp shakes its head, dunk, and it's off. That is a trick running lead system. So it's very likely semi-fixed in place, one shake of the head, and there's just enough force on there so that it converts into a running system. Bunk, like that. Hugely effective, and that's how I've been fishing pretty much for the last 16 years now. Now, if you watch some of my other videos, you'll see that normally I use that to do the job of the anti-tangle sleeve. So why am I now using that instead of that? We're solid PVA bag fishing here. If I was to install that tail rubber on there, it means that there's a gap between the lead-free leader and the lead. And that gap is where solid bag mix can get stuck, expand, and jam up the whole system, and we don't want that. So to prevent that, we use an anti-tangle sleeve, because when I pull that home, the anti-tangle sleeve blocks all of that hole, and no mix can get down there, and the fit of the lead is not changed at all. So that's why I'm using an anti-tangle sleeve instead of a tail rubber. The other trick I'm using, we've shown this on other videos as well, this is a pickup indicator or a telltale indicator. This has been tied with just 25-pound armour link, and I'm just tying it onto the mainline swivel like that. And what this does, if you fold that back there, I poke it up the hole of the inline lead, that goes through there like that, and that's how it's meant to work. Now, what is the point of that, you might ask? Well, when the carp comes along, he shakes his head, bonk, lead's off. If your hook wasn't sharp enough, or something got in the way, and you wind in the rig, and there's no carp on the end, and the telltale is out like that, it basically means that you've been done. You've been picked up and ejected. The carp's gotten away with it. Very, very powerful tool this, because it'll help you diagnose whether your rigs are any good and whether your hooks are any good. I've been fishing with this little setup all winter. I've done 11 nights, I've had 9 carp to 56 pounds, and I haven't got done once. I'm not saying that I might not get done at some point this winter. Winter's not over yet, but if I do get done, at least I'll know that, you know, I did have a pickup, I did have a chance, and unfortunately this time it didn't quite work. So we've got 3 solid PVA bags here, and externally they all look different, so they're all different bags, right? Well, what you can see looks different, but inside every single one of those bags is this same identical lead system, and that is the secret to it, because I can chuck any one of these bags out and I'm extremely confident that one of them is going to do a bite. Right, so we've got a nice mid-30 to show you this morning. This is my 3rd bite of the year, all on solid bags. Done 3 nights fishing in February, and each night has produced a carp. This isn't the biggest. The other 2 I've had have been in complete darkness. This one ripped off at 7 AM this morning, and it came on a long chuck bag. I actually had to recast this bag because I fluffed up my first cast. I forgot to put my casting glove on. So, but I redid the bag and got it out about 17-18 wraps. Absolute radio silence for 18 hours. Not a beep, not a pop, and he just ripped off 7 AM this morning. So typical kind of February bite, really. He's a bit angry. Right, let's slip him back. You've earned your corn. The mix that you use is personal preference. I'm using some 3mm live system here with some 6mm bloodworm pellets. Little hook bait on there, dumbbell wafter. It's pink, you like pink, use pink. Don't like pink, use yellow. It really doesn't matter that much. This one is built with PVA bag system mix there, some 6mm pellets in the middle, and backed up with bag system mix at the back there. That is not more effective than that. That is not more effective than that. This one is simply built with 3mm pellet there and 6mm pellet there. They contain this same simple, super effective trick inline running lead system. So if I pick up this bag, we can clearly see a couple of things going on here. That's the hook bait clearly visible there. But what is that white bit of foam there? That is actually half a nugget. So before I build the bag, so we've got a razor sharp hook. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put on a little bit of hook grease. So the hook grease is acting as a rust preventative, and it's also acting as a lubricant for the hook penetration. So I just take half a nugget there, hook the hook onto there. I'm going to fold round the nugget, and I'm just going to wet it, the back of the shank there, and very lightly fold that together. You don't want to compress that, because when you compress PVA, it can take quite a while to melt. Not such a problem in summer conditions, but in winter conditions, you really want that nugget to melt as quickly as possible. So why have I taken the time and trouble to put that nugget on? I want to keep the hook point protected at all costs. I don't want to hook a bit of broken crumb or a bit of pellet. I don't want the pellets to damage the hook point at all. If you're using hand sharpened hooks, these pellets are very hard and they can burr a hand sharpened hook over. I've seen that. If you're using a mix like this, a very, very fine mix, depending on how this mix is made up, potentially if there's any oils and stuff that is in this fine mix, they can actually accelerate the corrosion of a hook. So just putting a little bit of foam nugget in between that and the bag mix that you're using just stops the premature corrosion of the hook point. This doesn't matter much when you're making bags to order, but when you're pre-making bags like this in advance, then everything that we can do to keep the hook point solid and protected and corrosion free before it even gets anywhere near the water is a good thing. So the bags that I've been making have all been made up with a lead-free leader material like that. we've got a metre a leader on there, and we just loop to loop them on and off so I can pre-make them in advance. And that's great. I really like working with that system, but what if leaders are banned? What are you going to do? So one option, of course, it's very popular, is to use a PVA bag stem. And this is useful because these little stems are not classed as a leader. So you just have a normal looper mono on the end of the main line, and you can loop to loop the bags on, or you can tie directly. It's really up to you. But to get a PVA bag stem to work with a lead, we have to do a few things. Take the tail rubber off, pop the plastic insert out, and then I'm going to try and replace that plastic insert with this PVA bag stem. Problem is, you get the traditional semi-fixed rig setup. I can pull that in like that. It's not dangerous, it's just that quite a lot of force is required to pull, there we go, those two out. And you might think that's a free running lead, that. Well, with a small amount of force that goes in there, it gets jammed, and it's quite a lot of force to pull that out. This turns into a semi-fixed rig, and the carp are going to use the weight of the lead against you. Yes, you're going to catch a few, but you are going to get done. So if you're struggling on a water and you're fishing solid PVA bag stems, how can you be more successful? Well, what you need to do is you need to change the fit between this and this. And the easiest way I've found to do this is to make this hole bigger. So I'm going to cut this bag open and show you what's actually going on here, because I've modified the lead so that this will work as a proper trick running inline lead. That lead there, I've opened up the hole in that. So when a carp picks up that rig, comes into contact with the lead, reacts against the weight of the lead, dunk, there we go, 2 shakes and that's off. But that only worked like that because I changed the diameter of the hole in the bottom of that lead. So you can make PVA bag stems work, but you need to either use different leads with bigger holes in, or you need to modify the leads that you've got with a bigger hole in. So if I show you that again, that's how it needs to work. Just needs to slide in and out there with a very small amount of pressure. So it's a little fiddly, little testing, little experimentation, but if you want to get the very best out of PVA bag stems, then it's absolutely worthwhile modifying your leads. So when you're building a solid PVA bag, should you put the hook bait in first or the lead in first? So I've got 2 bags here, and they've been built in slightly different order. This one, nugget in first, hook bait goes in, the lead is just in there in the middle, slightly nose forward. You can just see a little bit of the hook link just curled round there, and I put finer pellets at the front because it's easier to fold the corners in to get it aerodynamic. This bag has been done slightly differently. I've put the lead in first, then I've just used 6mm pellets to fill the bag, and then I've put the hook bait in last. If that's working for you, great. It's just not the way I've ever built my bags. A bag built like this, it's going to cast well because you've put the lead in first, and when you put the lead in first, it's always going to be nose heavy. Personally, I don't really love the fact that the hook bait is up near the stem or near the leader, because for me there's a chance that the leader could be lying over the hook bait. I'd rather have the hook bait there, curl up the hook link, and then have the lead above it. No, my lead is not going to be as nose forward as it would be in this design, but I know that I can get my bags to fly very well. So at the end of the day, it's personal preference. It's whatever works for you. When you're starting out with solid PVA bags, where should you start? Because there's lots of options. I think a good way to start is to use a little 3mm pellet like this, because it's just easy to work with, it's easy to build a bag, but this is a less dense mix than a dedicated PVA bag mix. Right, so the sequence is this. So I'm going to put the hook bait in first. Hold the lead between my fingers, and I'm just going to get that to settle flat with a PVA nugget in the middle. Hook bait off towards one corner but not quite in the corner. That gives me the space to fold in the corner. and then we can start putting some mix in there. And if you just hold it over the bag like that, then you're less likely to tip it all over yourself. So that's 2 little scoops. Then I'm going to take the lead and nestle it into the 3mm pellets like that. So it's important to get that lead as far forward as you can. It's virtually sitting on top of the nugget. The nugget is just under there. The nugget is isolating the hook from the lead so that the lead's not damaging the hook. The hook link is just kind of curled up there in the bottom. That'll fully get settled out when I've put some more pellets on it. If you put too much mix in there, the lead will go too far up the bag and then it won't fly straight. So it's really important to get the lead as nose forward as you can. This is why we're using a small hook bait. This is why we're protecting the hook with a nugget. Now once we've got to that point there, we can take some more pellets and top up the bag. And if you just give the bag a little joggle, so the top of the lead is there, so I've just put enough pellets in to cover the lead. That's a medium sized bag, that's 3mm pellets, and if I tighten the neck up, you'll see that I've got a good probably 3 centimeters of top there. That's about as small a bag as you can make with 3mm pellets and a medium size, but with a little 2-ounce lead, I'm expecting that to come in at easily under 4 ounces, which makes it a very good casting weight for a 3.5 pound rod. I could put that 80 yards with a good punch relatively easily. If you're just starting out with solid PVA bags, it's better to use slightly less bait than slightly more. More bait is not going to catch you more carp. If you put too much bait in, you're just going to make the bag harder to cast with the rods that you've got. Just put enough bait to come to the top of the lead, barely cover it, and you'll get more of a kind of round bag, but there's nothing wrong with a round bag because that's going to cast very well. Now we get to the tricky business of how do we tie up this bag. Now there's all sorts of techniques that I've seen to do this, and I've tried a lot of ways, and I'll be honest, they don't really work for me. So the way I do it is this. Once I've judged that I've filled that bag fully, just give the bag a bit of a squeeze to make sure that the pellets are going fully into the corners there. I then twist the bag like that to get a really tight lock on it. If that's not drum tight, then the bag is not going to finish drum tight. And then I use that finger there just to stop the bag rotating. And then I'm going to use some PVA tape. I just use the narrow stuff and I wrap 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I don't cut that off until I've got 2 tags about 5 centimeters long. If you don't tighten that neck up tight enough, and you just kind of go once, maybe twice round, and you don't pull it tight enough, you'll see that there's a lot of air space in that neck, and that neck is also not very securely held. So if I were to do that, it would be very easy for this bag to split open on impact with the water. There's a huge amount of force when you're punching a solid PVA bag into water at 50, 60, 70 meters. So this needs to be super secure. Once you've got it as tight as you can possibly do, then it's a couple of granny knots over the top. Cut that down like that. And you're left with a bag that looks like that. When I'm making my bags in advance, the reason why I don't fold the corners in is that these bags, if you leave them even in a bucket of pellets, dry pellets for a few hours, they will start to go soft. If you've already folded the corners in, you can't get that bag tighter. So I'll leave the bags ready to go like that. Then when I'm ready to cast them in, I will pinch and fold in the corners at the last minute, and we just lick them and stick them. And by doing that, I can get a nice, tight, consistent aerodynamic bag. So we need to tighten up this back end here. All of the securing of the bag is done with that PVA tape. So anything I do behind there is extra or just not necessary. You might be tempted to kind of lick the back of that and then fold it there like that. I don't really love that because I'm just going to be folding back against the direction of flow of the air. the air's pushing that way, and if I don't do a really good job of sticking that, then there's a chance that I can form a pocket of air there, and I'm just going to cause drag and instability. The way that I normally do it is I actually lick the inside of that and literally just wrap it up the leader. Now you might think that's a big ugly blob of PVA. Depending on what PVA that you're using, you can get PVA snot, but I've been using the Nash fast melt for years. All the top branded stuff, I've no issues with it melting even in the winter. If you are having problems with PVA snot, or you're particular about how your bags look, then with a little bit of care you can cut the back of the bag off, and you can leave it like that. The air's pushing on the front of the bag that way. This is in the wake of the bag, so that is not going to be slowing the bag down in any way. If you want to make it even neater, you can just wet the neck of the bag and create a small neat blob. So I made this bag 2 or 3 days ago, and I folded the corners in when I made the bag, and I wanted to show you what difference it makes. This is a bit of a squidgy bag. It's all right for lobbing 40-50 yards, but it's not going to be the bag that makes you that 70 or 80 yards that you might be trying to get. So that's the problem with folding the corners in early. So this one I made on the same day, and I didn't fold the corners in. It's about the same kind of floppiness at the moment as this bag, but I can tighten that bag now. If I were to fold the corners in, I can get the bag tighter by delaying the folding in of the corners, and so that's why I do this trick. This is why for all my solid PVA bag work, I work with these leaders, because it means that I can make the bags in advance and I just loop to loop them onto a loop tied in the end of the main line. It's quick and it's simple. So I want to walk you through this solid PVA bag rig. Traditional semi-fixed inline, and we've got some rig tubing. This is not how I set up my bags. I would never set them up like this, but this is how I used to fish. And the first time you set this up, you might think, well, there's no problem, that's all going to work fine. The problem comes when you try and recast, because the whole lot's going to get completely wet and there's going to be water that ingresses into all of these bits. Water and PVA are a very bad combination. So you get water collecting here, capillarying up that anti-tangle sleeve there, disappearing up in there, disappearing up in there, disappearing up in there, and drying this out is really very difficult. And because this is on a rig tubing setup, there is no cut and shut. You can't do a loop to loop connection here, so you literally have to wind this in, dry it all off, and then build a new bag. And it's very slow and very cumbersome to do. You can sit there and you can blow that out and try and blow that out, but it's really not easy. So for me, there are lots of changes I want to make to this setup before I would fish with it. I wouldn't ever use an anti-tangle sleeve there. You don't need a quick change connection. It's far better just to tie the supple bladed rig straight to the swivel. Avoid semi-fixed rigs at all cost. If you've got tubing only rules and you have to fish tubing like that, honestly, forget solid PVA bags. Just use PVA sticks. It's simpler and just as effective. So I'm going to build another bag. We've got a little dumbbell wafter on there this time, and I'm going to use the bloodworm PVA bag mix. What you've got to be careful of, it's more dense. If you're used to using 3mm pellets, the issue that you might come up against is that the bags suddenly weigh a lot more than they did. If you've got powerful rods, that's not going to be an issue, but if you only got 3-pound rods, then you're going to be either distance limited or running the risk of breaking your rods. I've put enough mix in there just up to the top of the lead, and if I were to finish the bag like that, then it's definitely going to weigh more than the bag of 3mm pellets. One way round this is that I could pour some of that mix out, so we just use some of the finer mix around the lead and around the hook bait. It makes it nice and easy to fold the corners in, and then I backfill it with some 6mm pellets. There's lots of different mixes, there's lots of different ways to catch carp with solid PVA bags. There are no hard and fast rules, but you're always going to be limited by how much does the bag weigh, what test curve rods are you using. If you're using £3 rods, you're going to have to pay more attention than other anglers in what mix you choose, what size of bags you use, and how much you fill your bags. So I'm not trying to suggest that you absolutely have to have £3.5 test curve rods for solid PVA bag work. You don't. It's just that you're going to have to pay attention to the size of the lead and the choice of mix that you use in the bag. If I were to fill that 100% with a dense PVA bag mix, it's going to be heavier and it could push your rods over the limit. So you just have to be careful. So you can be really creative with solid PVA bags. You can use 3mm pellets, 6mm pellets, you can use a mix of both. You can use 100% PVA bag mix, you can use a blend of bag mix and 6mm, bag mix and 3mm. If you've only got some 3mm pellets and just use some 3mm pellets, it's still going to work. You just have to respect how far are you trying to cast and what power rods do you have. So if you want to use liquids inside a PVA bag, the best way to do it is to inject them in at the last minute. That'll keep the bags as firm as possible. So we just punch a little hole in the middle there with the scissors. This is the bloodworm compound. We're just going to take 2.5 mils of that, and by injecting it into the middle of the bottom of the bag, it means that we don't upset the balance of the bag. Every milliliter is a gram. It might not seem like much, but if your bag's right on edge in terms of balance, and 2 grams in the wrong place can really upset the flight. And this is another reason why I like to put the hook bait at the bottom, because that's where I'm going to inject the liquid, and I want the liquid pumping out attraction around my hook bait. It's all about soluble attraction, and the best way to get soluble attraction into a solid PVA bag is with a little bit of liquid. So if I want to inject the liquid at the front in order to keep the bag balanced, it really makes sense that the hook bait should be at the front, and then the liquid can soak into the hook bait, and the hook bait can then kick off attraction. At the end of the day, you want the carp to notice that first and suck up that bit first. So if you're in the habit of putting the lead in first and putting the hook bait in last, then really you ought to be injecting the liquid back there, but of course that's going to further destabilize the bag. Might cause you a problem, might not. But by doing it this way, I get the attraction where I want it to be, and I don't upset the balance of the bag so that they fly well. So when you make your loop-to-loop connection, what you've got to do is you've got to make sure that the loop is big enough so that you can easily pass the solid bag through it. So that's twice the diameter of a bag, so that's going to be nice and easy to do. Then it's just a question of folding over the loop in the mono, sliding that through the splice at the top of the leader, and then pulling our bag through. There we go, just like that. And then the loop to loop slides up like that. So I'm going to punch this one to the middle of the dam wall. It's clipped up at 18 wraps. As long as the bag doesn't explode because of the rain, we're going to be okay. Oh, absolute. That did not go well. So I've just wound this rig in, and it's very typical when you're fishing at this time of year. You're going to wind in black leaves and bits of shod like this. This is one of the reasons why I love fishing solid PVA bags at this time of year, because I'm lobbing the bag into all of this muck and I'm really not bothering. The carp will find it. It's the bait that's keeping the hook presented. It's stopping all this stuff from interfering with you getting a pickup. It's only when I wind this rig in that I'm going to hook debris like this. So I'm not bothered in the slightest that this rig is covered in muck. A rig will never come back clean at this time of year, not when you're fishing an older state lake like this. So don't worry about it. Don't let it put your confidence off. If your hook was sharp to start with and you're presenting the whole lot in a solid PVA bag, you are absolutely in with a chance of a fish. If you've never cast anything heavier than a 2.5 ounce carp lead in your fishing, then when you step up to casting a solid PVA bag, you're going to be shocked about how heavy they are and how much they load the rod. I've put this bag on the scales and it's weighing in without liquid at 4.25 ounces. Now I'm using a 9 foot 3.5 pound rod, and that's pretty much the upper limit for what this rod can safely handle with a full blooded cast. Now when you're casting a solid PVA bag that weighs about 4 ounces, then you're going to need to protect your finger. You can use a finger stall, but personally I prefer a casting glove. If you don't do that on a big cast, there is the risk of damaging your finger, or at least making it go very numb. The other thing you need to bear in mind is what mainline is going to be capable of withstanding a full-blooded cast with a 4 ounce weight. For all my solid PVA bag work, I prefer to use 15 pound 0.35 mono. Nothing thinner or lighter than that. And the reason is I need really good knot strength. I need knot strength at least around kind of 11, 12 pounds real world strength, not theoretical, not what it says on the tin, actual knot strength, deadlift tested with a weight. And if it passes that test, I know when I'm out on the bank, giving it the big one, and I'm not going to crack off. One thing to bear in mind is whether you need to pierce the bag or not. So some bags come pre-perforated. This one is not a pre-perforated bag. So what we've got in there is a load of air, the lead, the rig, and all the mix. So with all of my fishing this winter, I'm injecting liquid into the bag in the base there. So when I punch a hole and I inject that liquid, I am making a hole. Now, if you are just fishing these bags dry, then what I would do, and doing this is not going to negatively affect this bag anyway, I would just run over and pierce a few holes in like that. Because if you don't do that, what's going to happen is that the bag is going to fall very slowly through the water. We've only got a 2 ounce lead there, we've got over 2 ounces of mix, so we have got a lot of trapped air in there. If you're fishing a really deep lake and you're not perforating your bags, what's going to happen is that the PVA bag is going to melt before the bag even gets to the bottom, and yeah, you're not going to be fishing a solid PVA bag. If you are fishing a very shallow lake and you really want a very slow descent of the bag, that's the only time I would say that don't bother about perforating the bag or injecting with liquids. Just leave it like that and it will float down very gently. Well, I just put the rods out just after lunch. I just put 3 solid PVA bags out, and the left-hander has absolutely melted off. I'm quite convinced this is a catfish, and I'm playing it on a tiny little size 7 chod twister, 25 pound hooklink, and I'm back winding, and this thing is pulling hard. How on earth, as a carp angler, do you land a massive catfish using a 42-inch landing net? There's 2 ways of doing it. You can either net them tail first, or you can wait for them to swim in a circle and you net them from the middle. There's no way that you can net them in the conventional manner, mouth first, and drag them over towards the spreader block, because what happens is that the mouth might kiss the spreader block, but you're still going to have 2 or 3 foot of tail hanging out the back. Let's see if this plan works. Yeah, it's actually not very big. I'm just going to release the pressure. There we go, he turns. There we go. I'm just going to pop the hook out. To do that, I really must use a glove, otherwise he will, there we go, he's out. Easy as that with barbless, look. And yeah, he's not small. Get an idea of the full scale of him. Curled up there. They don't mind going in a circle like that. Yeah, they're just one big muscle really. Good sport, they don't half pull back. Love them or hate them, I think they're magnificent creatures. All you need to catch a big catfish is a very sharp small hook. Got to be a strong hook. That's a size 7 chod twister. Absolutely no issue, even with a massive creature. And I wasn't being ginger with that. That took about 15 minutes to come in, I was taking my 9 foot 3.5 pound scope to full battle curve, little inline running lead, 2 ounce running lead, bunk, done. It wasn't dropping off. The hook point is gone. I can just see that's bent over there, but there was no way that that was dropping off. So this hook link material, this is 25 pound arm link, and I can see that it's taken a bit of a pounding here, but it's still got plenty of gauge. It was nowhere near to failing. We normally use 35 pound for here, but in the winter I can get away with a 25 pound, no issue, because hooking these things is relatively rare. I've still never had the 25 pound fail on anything anywhere, to be fair, but it's a good, strong, thick hook link. There's no way that I would reuse this hook link again. This is an 8 kilo kettlebell. It's a super aggressive test, but when you consider we've got catfish twice as big, they are absolutely freaking massive. Let's see how close this hook link was to failure. No problem. And that is why we use what we use. Things would have to go spectacularly wrong for this rig to come under that load. We've seen things go spectacularly wrong, and if your rigs can pass that test, you've got a very good chance of landing what you hook.